My name is Emma. I'm 22, and I live in New York. I never imagined the life I thought I had with my boyfriend would spiral into the worst betrayal I've ever faced. We had been together for 3 years, high school sweethearts turned college partners, and I trusted him completely. It all started one ordinary Tuesday morning in our apartment. I had been feeling off for a few days, skipping my period, despite never missing a pill. When I finally took a test, the second line appeared and my heart sank. I called him immediately, my voice trembling, desperate for him to understand the gravity of the situation. When he walked in and saw the test, his face lit up. "Oh my God, baby, this is great," he said. My blood ran cold. I was crying, shaking, barely holding myself together. And he smiled. That's when I realized something was horribly wrong. When I think back on how it all began, it feels like a different lifetime. Nathan and I had known each other since high school. Back then, we were more acquaintances than anything else. Two kids who sometimes shared classes, sometimes exchanged a smile in the hallway, sometimes laughed at the same joke. Life pulled us apart after graduation, and I thought that was that. But fate, or coincidence, or maybe just the randomness of college admissions, threw us back together. We both ended up at the same university, studying similar majors, which meant classes together, long nights in the library, and those moments where old familiarity suddenly felt like something new. One day we were just catching up as old friends. The next we were studying together more often than not, then getting coffee, then dinner, then something more. It was a slow burn that became a flame, and for a while it felt right. The first year with him was sweet. We were in our little college bubble, everything tinged with the glow of youth and possibility. We would walk across campus holding hands, go to late-night diners, laugh about professors we couldn't stand, or sit in silence, comfortable just being next to each other. I remember the first time he told me he loved me. It was after a movie marathon in my tiny dorm room, both of us lying on the floor because there wasn't enough space on the bed. He looked over at me, his eyes soft, and said it like he'd been holding it in for years. I said it back without hesitation, and for once, my heart felt light instead of burdened. For a while, he made me feel safe. I had always been someone with walls, someone who struggled to trust easily, but Nathan seemed patient enough to wait. He was silly in ways that broke my seriousness, affectionate in ways that softened my edges. He brought me food when I was too sick to cook, rubbed my back when stress made me ache, and listened when I unloaded my anxieties about school and family. When I spiraled into panic, he sat with me until it passed, not asking me to explain, just letting me know I wasn't alone. Those were the memories I clung to later. The moments that convinced me he was someone worth fighting for. The boy who showed up with soup when I couldn't get out of bed. The boy who whispered that I was strong enough to handle anything. The boy who said he couldn't imagine his life without me. But the thing about cracks is that they don't appear all at once. They creep in slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the glass shatters. At first, the differences between us felt like quirks. I was structured, disciplined, always with a plan. My mornings started with alarms, I never snoozed, pills laid out neatly in my organizer, to-do lists already half-checked before noon. He was chaos embodied, staying up until 3 a.m. playing video games, sleeping through classes, improvising his way through assignments. I thought it was charming at first, the way he didn't take life so seriously. But soon I realized that charm was a mask for irresponsibility. Bills didn't pay themselves. Professors didn't excuse missed deadlines. Landlords didn't care about oversleeping. I picked up the slack, quietly at first. I reminded him about rent, covered when he came up short, picked up extra work shifts when his paycheck didn't stretch far enough. I told myself that's what love was, helping each other through rough patches. But his rough patch never ended. My support stopped being temporary and became expected. He began to treat me less like a partner and more like a mother. He'd lose his keys and call for me, certain I'd know where they were. He'd let his laundry piled up until I gave in and did it. He'd forget to schedule appointments and then pout until I handled it. "You're just better at this stuff," he'd say, flashing a smile that used to melt me, but now only made me tired. It was flattering at first, being needed, but the flattery soured into resentment. I didn't want to be his mother, I wanted to be his equal. Yet the more I shouldered, the less he seemed to even notice. And always there was his mother. She had been in the background since the start, but the longer we dated, the more her presence filled the space between us. She texted him daily, sometimes more than once, often about things I thought were ours alone. When we argued, she knew within hours. When I asked him to pick up groceries, she'd call to remind him the next day, as if my voice wasn't enough. "He's just looking out for me," he'd say when I expressed discomfort. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like she was keeping him tethered and me along with him. What unsettled me most was how much he told her about our relationship. Arguments I thought were private ended up dissected in their conversations. Solutions I didn't ask for arrived in our talks as though they were his ideas. It wasn't a partnership anymore. It was a triangle, with her pulling strings I couldn't cut. Still, I stayed. Love isn't logical. It's sticky, binding, emotional. I remembered the boy who had held me during panic attacks, the boy who had told me I was his world. I told myself he was young. He would grow up. He just needed time. I told myself my patience would balance his chaos. I ignored the flickers of control that appeared in small moments, like the time I mentioned wanting to travel abroad after graduation, just for a year. His face fell. His jaw tightened. "Why would you want to leave? What about us?" he demanded. I tried to explain it wasn't forever, but he shut down completely, muttering that I always made plans without him. Or the time I bought a new journal. Nothing fancy, just a small treat for myself. He frowned. "Do you really need that? We're broke." This from the same man who ordered takeout 3 nights a week and bought endless downloads for his games. I tucked the journal away and only used it when he wasn't around. Little by little, I hid pieces of myself. But the cracks spread wider when the pressure to become a mother entered the picture. His mother was relentless in her subtle, smiling way. She planted seeds every time we were alone. The joy of motherhood is like nothing else. You'll understand someday. Or, a baby might bring you closer. They're little miracle workers. Once when I confided that Nathan struggled with responsibility, she said, "Fatherhood changes people. He just needs to experience it." Her words sank into my skin like poison. I wasn't ready. I had health issues that made pregnancy risky, a career I was still building, bills I struggled to pay. The thought of bringing a child into that chaos terrified me. But I didn't say that to her. I just nodded, smiled, and went home feeling trapped. I tried to brush it off, but Nathan started echoing her. Small comments at first, like, "Wouldn't it be cute if we had a little one running around?" Then more pointed, "You'd make such a good mom." He framed it as compliments, but I felt the weight beneath them. I was on the pill, diligent about taking it. I even kept my packs organized, popping a week's worth into my pill organizer, so I could take them with my other medications. I didn't bother with the sugar pills. They were a different color, and I didn't need them. I kept the empty blister packs in my nightstand, a weird habit I picked up from my dad's doomsday prepping ways. What if I need it later? I'd always thought. That habit, I would later realize, was my undoing.
The day my period didn't come, I knew. My chest felt heavy, my stomach twisted. I took a test just to be sure, and when the second line appeared, my world crashed. I sat on the bathroom floor sobbing until I vomited, shaking so hard I could barely hold the little stick that now held my future hostage. I called Nathan. He didn't want to come home at first, brushing me off because of work, but when I broke down on the phone, begging, he finally came. I expected shock, fear, maybe even tears. What I got was a smile. His whole face lit up and he said, "Oh my God, baby, this is great." I saw red. My body was crumbling with fear, my mind spiraling with the impossibility of it all, and he was smiling like he had won something. I screamed at him, tried to explain through snot and tears that this was not great. We were broke, I was sick, we weren't ready. He barely listened. He left me in the bathroom to calm down, and that's when I saw it. The blister pack. In the trash. 7 of my real pills were gone. The sugar pills were a different color. I would have noticed if I looked closely, but I took so many meds in the morning that I just dumped them into my mouth, never imagining I had to check. He must have swapped them, then thrown the evidence carelessly in the trash. Careless, or maybe he wanted me to find out. The world tilted. My hands shook as I dug them out, staring at the empty spots where my safety had once been. I thought about the times I'd unlocked my phone to find my period tracker open. I'd brushed it off, but now it all made sense. He had been watching, planning, waiting. And suddenly, every word from his mother, every smile from him, every compliment about me being a good mom clicked into place. It wasn't an accident. It was betrayal.
I confronted him the next morning, shaking with fury, holding the blister pack in my hand like evidence in a courtroom. My voice broke as I demanded an explanation. He tried to deny it at first, said, "I must have made a mistake. Maybe I dropped them. Maybe I'd forgotten to take them." But the pills were in the trash. There was no denying it. When I refused to back down, he cracked. His eyes darted, his hands fidgeted, and finally, the words tumbled out. He said he just wanted us to be closer, that he thought a baby would fix everything. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, that he loved me, that he thought once I was pregnant, I'd realize it was the best thing for us. I felt like I was standing outside my own body, listening to a stranger confess. This wasn't love. This wasn't care. This was violation. He hadn't just tampered with my pills. He had stolen my choice, my autonomy, my trust. I left the apartment that day and went to my parents' house. I didn't tell them everything, only that Nathan and I were having problems and I needed space. They welcomed me in without questions, though I could feel their curiosity simmering beneath the surface. I wasn't ready to face their opinions, especially knowing how their faith might complicate the conversation about abortion. The decision weighed heavily on me. I hated the thought of terminating, not because I judged others, but because for myself, I had always imagined that if the day came, I would choose differently. But this wasn't a wanted pregnancy. It wasn't even an accident. It was forced on me. My body was already fragile from chronic illness, and the risks of carrying to term terrified me. The idea of raising a child in this toxic environment was unbearable. So, I made the appointment. The days leading up to it were a blur of nausea, tears, and hollow silences. Nathan blew up my phone, alternating between begging me to come home and accusing me of betraying him. He sent long texts about how I was ruining our future, how I was killing our family before it even began. Then, moments later, he'd switch to apologies, saying he just wanted to talk, that we could work through it. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned on the few friends I had trusted with the truth. They were blunt with me, sometimes harsh, telling me I needed to grow a spine and cut him off completely. At first, their words stung. I wondered if I was overreacting, if maybe I was making this into something bigger than it was. But then I'd look at the blister pack again, and the weight of the betrayal would come crashing down. One friend offered to test him to see if he'd confess to someone else. She messaged him gently, circling the topic until he broke. And just like that, he admitted it. He said he felt like a terrible person, that he hadn't known how to tell me, that he thought it was the only way to keep us together. His words didn't feel like remorse. They felt like excuses, like he was only sorry he got caught. The day of the appointment, I was terrified. I sat in the clinic waiting room with my hands clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My friend sat beside me, her hand on my knee, grounding me. The walls were painted in soft colors, a poor attempt at comfort. But all I could hear were the echoes of his voice telling me this was great. This is what he wanted. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. The procedure itself was quick, clinical, almost anticlimactic compared to the storm raging inside me. When it was over, I felt empty, physically and emotionally, but also, strangely, lighter. The weight of an unwanted future had been lifted, though the pain of how I'd gotten there still pressed heavy on my chest. That night, I cried until I had no tears left. It wasn't grief for the pregnancy, not exactly. It was grief for myself, for the trust that had been shattered, for the version of me who had once believed love could survive anything. When he found out I'd gone through with it, his mask slipped. The pleading stopped, the apologies turned to rage. He called me cruel, heartless, selfish. He said I'd destroyed everything, that he could never forgive me. The irony was suffocating. He had destroyed everything long before. I blocked his number after that. But blocking someone's number doesn't block the memories. They still haunted me. I'd replay our conversations in my head, dissect every moment where I should have seen the truth. I'd lie awake wondering how long he'd been planning it, if his mother knew, if she had encouraged it. I thought about every time she'd smiled at me and said a baby would bring us closer, and bile would rise in my throat. The anger consumed me at first. I wanted revenge, wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering. But anger is exhausting, and holding on to it only kept me tethered to him. So I shifted. I focused on rebuilding myself. I poured energy into school, into work, into friendships that uplifted me instead of draining me. I started therapy, where for the first time, someone put words to what I had experienced. Reproductive coercion, abuse, betrayal trauma. Hearing it framed that way was both devastating and validating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What he had done was real, and it was wrong. Therapy became a lifeline. My therapist helped me understand that trust wasn't weakness, that I hadn't been stupid for believing in him. He had taken advantage of my love, my openness. That was on him, not me. Slowly, the nightmares began to fade. The ones where I swallowed sugar pills thinking they were real, where I stared at a positive test and saw his smiling face over and over again. I still woke up in cold sweats sometimes, but the mantra helped. It's over. It's over. It wasn't an instant transformation. Healing came in waves. Some days I felt like I could conquer the world. Other days I couldn't get out of bed. But each wave carried me further from him. One day, months later, I realized I hadn't thought about him at all. The silence of his absence was no longer heavy. It was freeing. I started to imagine a future again. Not the one he tried to force on me, but one of my own making. A future where I graduated, found a career I loved, maybe traveled like I'd always wanted. A future where I could love again, but only on my terms, with someone who respected me fully. I returned to the apartment only months. It already felt foreign when I stepped through the door, like a place I'd once known but could no longer claim. The air was stale, thick with the smell of last week's takeout and the trace of his cologne that clung stubbornly to the curtains. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene, each object carrying the weight of betrayal. I wasn't alone. My friend walked beside me, steady and silent, her presence a shield against the fear curling in my stomach. We had planned it carefully, choosing a time when I knew Nathan would be in class. The thought of facing him again made my skin crawl. We moved quickly. I packed clothes, books, my laptop, my medications.
I didn't bother with the sentimental things, the framed photos, the gifts he had given me, the sweater I once wore to feel close to him. They could rot there, remnants of a life I no longer wanted. When the last bag was zipped shut, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The apartment wasn't mine anymore, but neither was he. I walked out without looking back. But he wouldn't let it end so easily. The messages came fast, frantic. "You can't just leave like this. We're supposed to be a family. I know I messed up, but I can fix it." Each one chipped at me, not because they tempted me to return, but because they reminded me of who he pretended to be, the boy I once loved, the one who promised me safety. For a while, I ignored him, but eventually I needed closure. Not for him, but for me. I wanted to hear him say it in his own voice, to strip away the last shred of denial. So I called. He answered immediately, his voice rushing out. "Baby, thank God. I've been going crazy. Just come home. We can talk." "I know what you did. I found the pills, I saw the blister pack in the trash, and you admitted it to my friend." Silence stretched between us. Then a broken whisper. I just wanted us to be closer. You thought you could trap me." "No, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." My voice rose, sharp and sure. "You violated me, Nathan. You stole my choice. You used me as a vessel for your fantasy. That's not love. That's abuse." He sputtered, tried to argue, tried to paint it as desperation, as love gone wrong. I didn't let him. "I'm done. Don't contact me again." I hung up before he could reply. The silence that followed was cleansing, like air rushing into a suffocating room. But recovery wasn't instant. Healing never is. At first, the grief came in waves, pulling me under. I grieved for the love I thought we had, for the version of myself who believed in it, for the life I might have had if he hadn't chosen betrayal. Nights were the worst. Nightmares dragged me back. Dreams where I swallowed sugar pills thinking they were real. Dreams where I stared at a positive test while he smiled and smiled. I'd wake soaked in sweat, whispering to myself, "It's over. It's over." Therapy helped. My counselor gave me words I hadn't been able to find. Reproductive coercion, betrayal trauma. She reminded me, gently and often, that what happened wasn't my fault. Naming it didn't erase the pain, but it made it real, undeniable, not just some story in my head. My friends became lifelines. They showed up with food, sat with me through silence, pulled me outside for walks when I wanted to stay hidden. One night, around a cluttered kitchen table, one of them said, "You're the strongest person I know." He thought he could take your power, but look at you now. You're free. I didn't feel free then, not fully, but hearing it planted a seed. Slowly, it grew. There were moments I hated myself for not seeing sooner, for missing the signs, but I learned to reframe. Trust wasn't a weakness. He chose to betray. That choice belonged to him alone. My crime was loving someone unworthy. Sometimes I wrote to him in a journal, letters I never sent. I poured my rage and grief onto the page, told him how he had stolen not just pills, but my peace of mind, how he had ruined intimacy for me, how he'd never understand the depth of what he'd taken. I told him that one day he'd realize he hadn't built a family. He had destroyed the only real love he might have had. And then I closed the journal. The words contained, no longer festering inside me. Months passed. The raw wound became a scar. The nightmares loosened their grip. The silence of his absence shifted from heavy to liberating. I began to imagine again. A future not dictated by him, not poisoned by coercion, but mine. A career I'd love, travels I'd take, people I'd choose who respect me. Maybe love again, someday, but only if it was built on trust. Looking back now, I see the girl I was before. She was hopeful, naive, vulnerable. I grieve for her, but I honor her too. She survived. She walked through fire and came out scarred, but alive. Nathan thought a child would fix us. Instead, he broke everything. What he didn't realize was that in trying to take my power, he gave it back to me tenfold. I am no longer the girl who shrank under pressure, who let others dictate her path. I am the woman who chose herself. And that, more than anything, is freedom.